Awesome. Well, welcome to the first of our innovation series here at DeMoore McKim. Over the next 3 days, we're going to be highlighting different MBA and MS in innovation entrepreneurs throughout our programs. And we're pretty excited to kick it off today with Sam and Ulysses, who are going to talk a little bit about how they built a cannabis venture. So Sam, Ulysses, I'll pass it over to you guys and feel free to kick it off.
Sounds great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Cassie, and always great to be back with Northeastern in any capacity. I'm sure Sam will say the same. And yeah, we just got, we can kick things off with just a couple questions here. So I'll dive right into it. Sam, tell us about how you founded Sugar Grove and how the idea came about.
Sure. My experience kind of started in Colorado, my undergraduate career, where I was at school for chemical engineering at CU Boulder. And I had a lot of, during that time, right around 2012, they legalized recreational cannabis in Colorado. And so I had a lot of friends that are engineers and non-engineers too, that basically jumped into the market where, having small grows, like some of them even in their closet and stuff, and built brands though, and were able to really capitalize on that and start companies. So one friend truly is still working, running his company in Colorado, another friend doing CBD. So I was always pretty impressed by that. I really loved the people in the industry that I met in Colorado. And then so I went on to become a medical device engineer, and then came back to Northeastern with a plan to write a business plan. And I naturally always had cannabis in mind for that. I have a high school friend up in Maine that is a caregiver running his own company, and we started talking. I approached him. I said, hey, I'm writing this business plan. I got a lot of resources through Northeastern MBA to really make something good here. You have your operation going on up in Maine that really was a good fit for what I was trying to do, because give a real life business that I could write a plan for down in Massachusetts. So, he had all the costs. I could make a real financial model using the numbers that he's already finding up in Maine, and then extrapolating that to what would be a larger operation down in Mass. So it was a good fit, and it was really fun to write the plan, and a really good way to kind of capitalize on my experience as an MBA Northeastern.
That's great. That's great. And you mentioned the Maine market and the Colorado market, especially going out to college in Colorado. What differs do you see like in the Massachusetts market, especially bringing that experience from DeMoore McKim?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like getting back into I came from a regulated medical device industry, right? So much red tape, which, you need when you're creating a life, some sort of device that's going to be, breaking someone's skin and touching people's blood. So I come from this really regulated industry in med device. And it's funny, Massachusetts cannabis is like just as regulated. I mean, there's so many.
Telling me.
Yeah, there's just, and so then you talk to Hunter up in Maine. That's my business partner, and Maine is kind of like, let's just get it going, like they're very, it's much easier permitting and zoning to build out buildings. You don't have this crazy onerous licensing process where, Massachusetts, you got to get the HCA, and then you got to submit your application. But just to get the HCA, you already have to have your location,
Right.
There's a lot of money up front in Massachusetts is really what it is. And funny, comparing that to Colorado was like the least regulated. It was like they legalized it one day, and the next day they were talking about bills, allowing people to consume cannabis just walking down the street. So they really went, I think, full, non-regulated the other way. But you still have to take advantage of that system, because you, as you probably know too, like that almost became like a cartel-like structure in Colorado with the first movers that really were able to then capture a huge amount of market share, lobby really hard, and protect themselves from new competition. And they're just still kind of undoing what happened early on in Colorado. So
Man, no, it's a perfect answer. I mean, you unpacked a lot there, especially talking about the first mover advantage, and then the fact that they are fixing some of the issues that, after 5, 6, 7 years of commerce there. And I think one thing, especially here in Massachusetts, as I'm part of the economic empowerment program, which is very much righting the wrongs of cannabis prohibition in the state of Massachusetts here, which is reason why, the rollout for cannabis has been a little bit slower than in Colorado. So just curious on your perspective on corporate responsibility, social entrepreneurship in the space, especially how that relates to your time as studying business at DeMar McKim.
right, yeah, great question. First, I think DeMar McKim really hits home. They had we were just talking about Marla at the beginning of this, who's one of the HR professors, and they do really stress corporate governance, like good corporate governance and things like that, and as you're going through the program, and that's been really great, honestly, shifting over when I started this company in last March. The Massachusetts cannabis industry, more than any other industry I've ever heard about, is all about exactly what you're talking about. We have to write a diversity plan, a positive impact plan. All those things are looking strictly at how to make sure you're hiring a diverse workforce. You're helping people that have been impacted by marijuana prohibition throughout the state, looking for people with non-violent felony offenses to bring them back into the fold. So when we did Sugar Grove, our positive impact plan is really based around first our hiring targets, making sure that we have a very diverse work crew. We're hiring local people, with a focus on minorities, women, former veterans, not former veterans, and then our so that's on the hiring side, and then also setting up for our positive impact plan a way to actually a class that we would be being held to help people go back and do a query search to to seal their record, to help them, a class that also teaches them tools to start a business, how to get financing for a business. So there's a lot of focus from Massachusetts to on cannabis to right the wrongs of
Right.
past government action, and they're leaning pretty heavily on us. I mean, you have to spend a lot of time and money up front to put this stuff together. So I think it's really cool.
Oh, absolutely, man. And that's, to your point, some of the states out west that are just, missed the boat on that, where here it is a requirement for annual, basically renewing your license to kind of show what you've done, you know what I mean, in terms of, basically diversity and positive impact for these communities. So I want to switch gears a little bit, because I think you had told me that you're concentrated in finance, and both you and I haven't graduated. Well, you're almost graduating in the spring. I graduated in 16 and got involved with the IDEA program, which was a great resource for business planning, pitch decks, financials, all that stuff. So I'd love to hear about your experience with IDEA and how it relates to, the business now.
I mean, IDEA is the best networking you can do at Northeastern. That's how me and you met. Like, I think I met you, I had my idea, and then we had a conversation like 2 weeks later. It was like, I was like, hey, you got to talk to Ulysses, and just like connected us. It was like, oh, okay, cool. And yeah, IDEA is like the best thing that I heard about IDEA my first week that I was in the program. They said, hey, anybody wants to sign up to be a coach for IDEA? And I came into the program knowing, again, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I wanted to be in the startup world. I naturally was like, that's going to be a great thing for me. So became a coach at IDEA. And then when the second spring semester, or my second semester in the spring, I went back to IDEA. I made a financial model, and it was the best resource ever, was to have people actually that weren't even cannabis related that know how to build a P&L, how to like create pro formas and look at like financial projections and show how you put that stuff together and how an investor is going to view it, because really that model is for raising money just as much for you planning your business. And it was so critical for me early on to be able to have that resource, because I was able to make a very substantial financial model, put together my business plan in a really professional way, and go out and raise our first seed capital to get the company launched. And now without that, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so yeah, I mean, and I know you did that too. So like, how was your experience with Idea?
Oh man, Bob was just popping up in my head. And Bob Lenz, for those who don't know, I mean, he's just a pillar at Northeastern and getting involved with Idea. And I was telling Sam about this recently, that like, for Bob, this is a new industry. Bob's just a classic old school business dude, where his perspective is like, sometimes we can come from a place of passion, especially with cannabis. But for someone like Bob, who knows nothing about cannabis, and he just asks you the strict, hard business questions that you're like, oh, okay, maybe, this makes sense to kind of figure this out and answer this question in this capacity. We just kind of have to remove like your feelings for it and be like, all right, it's a really good, perspective on it. So that's what I always enjoyed about Idea, is that it was never about the cannabis stuff. It was more or less about the business side. And I've taken probably about three businesses through there, just at the idea phase, and in the just being able to structure the idea certainly helps. So a lot of love for the program, man. And I didn't know you were a coach either. That's dope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Set stage and yep. Ready coach and set coach.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So yeah, just shifting gears a little bit here to COVID and the pandemic that we're in. So, as many people know at this point, cannabis is federally illegal still, but in 31 so states, it's essential business. These businesses are operating through the pandemic. So how has that impacted, basically you getting Sugar Grove going?
Everything. Yeah, it's been brutal. You're talking about COVID is everywhere. And so, what is already a pretty onerous and slow moving municipal process to get zoned, to get permitted, to get your HCA passed to a selectman meeting. You got a lot of moving parts that are already pretty bureaucratic and slow. And so, everything has been moved out. Our whole timeline's been moved out. A lot of hurry up and wait. So, we're not even digging our foundation yet, and still we were hoping to be getting things going by the spring. It's probably now the fall or even the winter at this point. So it's definitely slowed everything down, everywhere. And we have our HCA meeting, and we're hearing people coming up from the town, and they all have their own COVID update. And every town, it seems like we hear from, has tens of people that have passed away from COVID, or they're having to spend money, or they're running budget deficits and don't have staff that can come and work on certain days. So it affects everything. And for a startup, your biggest goal is to get into the market and start executing a go-to-market strategy, and especially in this kind of market where there's still so much room to grow, capturing market share. The faster you're in, the faster you're able to establish your brand. So it definitely slows it down. It definitely changes things that you need to account for looking forward. And I know that you have your building going right now. I mean, how does that affected you with actual construction and moving forward with a space?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for asking. And sorry if you guys hear some stuff going in the background. It's just painters finishing up. But yeah, I mean, in terms of COVID, man, we lost an investor like right when COVID hit. And this was obviously last year. So what it basically allowed us to do, and I'm a person that like looks at it from the perspective of like there's always a silver lining, there's always positive to it. So had we closed that deal, the structure of our business would have been a little bit different. We're here, we're able to retain a lot of ownership, especially as a Black entrepreneur in the space. To have, all the ownership of the company is huge, and basically be able to raise on debt. So we got out of that deal just because of COVID. But, in terms of the build out and the construction stuff, I think, what COVID has pushed is state regulators and local governments to do is to look at the entire infrastructure of their system and like how they actually communicate with people. And we've seen a little bit of acceleration since that. Like we've acquired 4 licenses during COVID, and that's because the CCC has, had time to like, be in meetings and be very diligent about how these meetings are going, because it's all digital in front of us, right? Like we're not all commuting to one area at this point. We're all on the phone here, still having a dynamic conversation. So I think, that's the silver lining, is that for all that's going on with COVID, there's ways that you can look around and look at things and say, hey, is there a more efficient way for us to do that? And I feel like the CCC has generally done that thus far. So yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned, the HCA, for those that don't know, that's a host community agreement at the local level, and basically we need that sign off from the local government, whether it be select board, mayors, city managers, before we can go ahead and move on to the CCC state application. And it's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's some hiccups early on, but after almost a year of it, they've kind of got the process down packed at this point. So like, yeah, it's all a learning experience for everybody, So, but yeah, just and going back to you graduating in the spring, how has that balance been for you? Because me personally, I started my business like literally, I don't know, 2 weeks after I graduated, or 2 weeks after I finished my MBA at Northeastern. But like you were in the middle of it, so how was that experience balancing both of those for you?
Definitely some weeks are pretty long. Yeah, I think it's a hurry up and wait game with a startup, right? There's a lot of stuff. Sometimes you're like, whoa. I knew that I had to start my residency in June, the corporate residency for the MBA, and so I had the month of May to write the business plan and put together the financial model. I probably worked, 80 to 100 hours a week doing that. I was refining numbers, writing, rewriting. I mean, the business plan and model is an iterative process. You never stop writing it until it's, I still don't write. Yeah, there's always a new thing. It's like, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, and
Right.
new numbers come up. So you're always iterating through it. So I mean, I knew I had kind of a deadline to get that thing going, and so I was working like a dog to get that through, because we have other things too. It's like there's money up front. You just got to spend money with this type of business. There's lawyer fees, there's municipal fees, there's state fees, there's a million different things that you're trying to do. And so I just had to, I'm good at time management. It's about just understanding what you need to get done and what you have time for. And it's been a balance. It's sometimes been tough. But this is the why you come to school, right? I mean, to me, it's all learning. So like my point of being an MBA at Northeastern has been, I think there's nothing better than real world experience, and that's what Northeastern gives you with the co-op.
Right.
And I maybe just doubled up on that a little bit, and
Right.
just keep using all the tools. And again, with like idea, you're building a model. With your finance game, you're losing time value of money and understanding like how to incorporate that kind of stuff into your model. And you're doing accounting, you're doing go-to-market strategy, marketing, you're doing branding. So you're really touching on all the aspects of an MBA. You starting a company as an entrepreneur, and idea is the best part for that too, because you can do ideas kind of like, hey, we'll give you the small startup capital if you can get through this process. So they kind of give you that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what for me, this business plan was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, hey, there's something here, and we can do this. So it's been challenging, but it's been definitely worth the time.
Absolutely. And I love how you say that nothing's better than real world experience. That's what I always loved about Northeastern. Even when I graduated and I was working at a pharmaceutical company, and we had a bunch of co-op students from, the pharmacy school in there. And it was just really cool, like working alongside them while they're, going through their program. So I think it's not only just the business side of things, it's like, most of the colleges at Northeastern kind of go in that realm. And, for me, I did part-time MBA. So same thing, I was working full time while I was while I was a student, and, very accommodating for scheduling and classes and things like that. So just a lot of love for it. But then you did mention some obstacles. What were some obstacles that you faced when launching the business, and what were some things that were maybe a little bit easier that you weren't expecting?
Man, obstacles. You got to get an investor pool together, and you got to convince them to give you money. And, especially with this business, it's like, hey, give me a bunch of money, and in 2 years, maybe I'll give you some money back. Like 2 or 3 years. So like, when you try to get seed capital, that's like kind of a daunting thing, because you're really trying to convince people that you have things together. The things that came together easier for me was maybe, writing the plan, and like how much I actually felt like I learned in the first year of my Northeastern experience, and also leveraged things I've done as an engineer. I was like, oh wow, like I actually really know how to like put this stuff all together. Like I think I get what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Absolutely.
So that definitely came together. And a little, it was a lot of work, don't get me wrong. No one wants to write 30 pages single space. It's a hard thing to have to edit and go back and then find time between your real job and this job, and then also convincing the team that this thing is real. Like you're trying to bring people on board, so like but I guess it was kind of shocking to me, and I think it speaks to how much people are excited about cannabis. It's like it didn't take too much convincing. I thought it was going to be like this like really daunting task to get the seed capital, but once we had our plan in place and we went out and we actually found people that were about this, it was like everything just started falling into place pretty rapidly. So, just tools that you learn at MBA are definitely things that are applicable to your real life. So,
Absolutely.
I'll put that question back on you. What have you found challenging, and what have you found the most difficult?
Oh man, no, that's a great question. I think that honestly, and this is kind of more like touchy feely, I want to say that like the challenging part was getting people to realize that this wasn't a pipe dream. And partly it's like family and friends, right? Because they look at someone like me who's been around cannabis for so long, and even business for so long. Like I worked in a family business growing up. I spent 10 years in there before I went to go to a business school. And basically, just having those conversations with family and friends to say, hey, we're actually doing this. Like it's a lot of work. Granted, it's been 3-4 years at it. So like people really start to resonate. It really starts to resonate with people when material things come to life, like actually doing the build out and having a piece of paper that says, hey, you're licensed. You know what I mean? But that whole 2 years before that, people are just like kind of like whatever, man, like writing you off or whatever. But yeah, I would say the easier part is just for me at least was putting the team together. Like I have a great business partner and a great group of folks that basically helped us get this far. And I would definitely, just attribute, experience in Northeastern, as well as just being a kid that loves sports and being around other people. So, but yeah, it looks like we're coming up on a little bit of time here. We can get to another question here, which would probably be, what advice would you give the audience? Talking about furthering your education and propelling it in their entrepreneurship ideas. So what advice would you give to other students?
Oh yeah, I think this is a great question. When you're trying to further your education, the MBA is a hands-on learning experience, and we've talked about this too. You can go into your MBA and you can get by and coast through, but you want to be using the stuff that you're learning, because that's the only way you can learn this stuff. Like a lot of it seems so simple and basic, when you read it in the textbook, and then when you're actually trying to apply it, it's very complicated. Like there's a lot of nuances to it. So, for me, I knew going in that I wanted to write a business plan and learn financial accounting as my goal. Like I want to come out and having written a business plan and understand how to read the financial statements of a company. And I thought those two things were going to be very valuable for me. And yeah, I think I fell into cannabis and I love cannabis. And I think this is a great space to be working in and writing the business plan for, and things are definitely looking up. But I don't think you need to have some grand scheme to write a business plan. And I think Idea does a great job of this. It's just come up with an idea, come up with any idea. And the process of writing a business plan, whether or not you fulfill your dream of starting that company or you end up or it doesn't work out, you get unbelievable experience just doing that process. I mean, understanding how to put together a basic P&L and writing a go-to-market strategy and a value proposition with kind of a beta prototype of whatever you're looking to create is invaluable experience. And you can do it at any time, any person. The great thing about Idea too was that you found students from all over the academic spectrum coming in there. You found people that were English majors, history majors, you found engineers, you found business majors, and it's a great networking thing too. So, I think you just need you want to just be practicing your skills. And so take anything, if you have an idea, just write a business plan about it, go do market research, try to understand what the market is that you're trying to reach, how valuable that market is, how you could penetrate it, what's a value proposition for that product. And writing that stuff all up. And if nothing else, you'll have a really good kind of resume talking point or interview talking point when you do go out and you're trying to find your next job, or it does work out and you get to start the company, and raising capital is just and propelling your career that way.
That's great.
How about you? What's your advice for the audience?
Oh man, advice. I'm not great at advice, but I will say that first thing that comes to mind is like don't quit. And part of it is because, well, there's some motivation factors there too. I think I told you this when we spoke yesterday. Like literally when I finished the MBA program at Northeastern and like really started to look into starting this business, I ended up meeting so many people that went to Northeastern, and it felt like a divine kind of time, especially one of them being an investor in the cannabis space. He didn't invest in my business, but this guy lives out in Springfield and was like, hey, I invested in one of the first cannabis companies in Massachusetts, and kind of gave me the lay of the land and said, hey, by the way, I'm also a Husky. So it was one of those things where like, yeah, it just made me feel more connected with the world, knowing that like, there are a lot of people who graduated from there and are doing some really great things in their professional career. And then the other side of it is that like when I wanted to work in the industry, even before I started the business, I didn't see much of myself in the cannabis industry. And that's more of a less of a thing that's more on the social side of things that we talked about before, is just that like, the past harms have been, a lot of folks, that Black and brown people have been arrested for cannabis, but they're not the ones that hold the licenses. So that's a huge, huge motivating factor for me. Just, like I mentioned before, having a great team, definitely advising to have a great team, a great network, but then finding that, that burning desire inside to help you to keep going, man, like don't quit. So yeah, not necessarily advice, but just talking from my experience.
You got to see things through for sure. That's another thing too. It's like you're always going to run into, it's like mental toughness, like,
Right.
You're gonna have down points, and if you can just keep on grinding through it and get to the next day, like that's invaluable lesson in itself.
Absolutely, man. Oh, that's great. Well, great chopping it up with you, man. We can pass it over to Cassie at this point.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was really awesome and very insightful. I am going to end the recording now, but we'll stick around if anyone has any questions on the call for a little bit. Feel free to ask away.